My name is Greg Jankowski from SolidWorks, and this is the CAD Admin Survival Guide. This is a shorter version of the 4-hour version of this I give on Sunday afternoons. So if you were there yesterday, it's going to be a lot of the same sort of thing. Technical, we're going to talk about a number of different things. Obviously, we're probably not going to spend a lot of time on many of them because we're going to cover a lot of different areas. If you've got questions during the presentation, ask. Because of the time constraint, I need to keep it moving. We may need to take some things afterwards. You can find me. I'm either in the partner pavilion. If you're a CSWE, I'll be there tonight also. And you can always catch me anytime around. Also, if you're on the forums, you'll see I'm active on the forums. I'm active on Twitter. And if you ever want to get a hold of me, it's fairly easy to do. So we're going to start with technical resources. So why are they important? It's not important that you know all the answers. It's not. But it is important that you know where to go look for them. So we're going to talk about a number of different resources that you can use to know where to go look for answers. From our point of view, and I think you heard a little bit of that from Bertrand today. We're looking at more ways, my SolidWorks, I'll talk about that a little bit, that we can make the resources more discoverable. We have a lot of information, we have a lot of content. It's not always easy to find, or you have to go to multiple places, which, quite frankly, you're probably not going to do. We want to add value, and a good example of that is the part reviewer. It was, I think, in SolidWorks 2012, we added a feature called the part reviewer. So it allows you to add comments to a model, and you can actually replay a model. So one of the things that was always a good technique is when you wanted to see how someone created a model, you take the feature, you take the rollback bar, and you go feature by feature. Well, there was also an option that you could select and use the up and down arrows. Great way to walk through someone's part. So the part reviewer just automates that a little bit further, and that if you've added comments to your features, you can actually walk through and actually see how a part's done. So one thing we did with the part reviewer is we have a bunch of models that other people have created. If you're familiar with some of the people that do the tips and tricks here at SolidWorks, like Ed Eaton or Phil Sluter, these are the people that we've had actually make some of these. No, I know. I saw it yesterday. Yeah, if you've seen it yesterday, it's going to be the same thing. So finding stuff on the web. I today, even if I'm having a problem, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go paste it in Google. It is amazing what you can find and what sort of resources are available. It is a good tool, and you should use it because you can find a lot of answers. There is a feature here inside of Google. If you go more tools, I think they changed the name of it, but you can actually do something, and I use this very often. There's an option when you're searching Google, it's more search tools or more tools, and it allows you to select the date range. So when I'm looking for an answer, I don't necessarily care that some relevant answer they found from 2002. It probably doesn't pertain to me. So a lot of times I'll look for last month or last week or last year. I use that tool a lot inside of Google. It's actually why I use Google still more than Bing, because Bing doesn't offer the same thing. Also in Google, you can also set up custom searches if you just wanted to search X amount of websites. Probably not use that often. Another thing that's very useful, if you don't know the online help site, help.solidworks.com, all of our documentation's online, and probably even more importantly, it's got a good search engine in front of it. If you're used to or still using the CHM file that comes directly with the SolidWorks packaging, you know that search is it doesn't usually find too much or find the things that are relevant. Help.solidworks.com, another really good resource. So some of the things that Bertrand talked about today, there's lots of different, these are all properties we host. We have a lot of really good information inside of our blogs. You'll get technical tips, there's resellers adding things. Some of us for SolidWorks add things. We have teacher blogs. We have an external SolidWorks blog. We have blogs inside the forums. There's lots of good technical information in there. Twitter, discussions, the discussion forums, very heavily used. YouTube, I know Bertrand mentioned that today, but we have our own SolidWorks YouTube channel, which means it's the videos we publish. It's not just looking there and finding that, someone posted something that kind of had related to SolidWorks. We actually have our own YouTube channel. We have a lot of best practices documents inside of some of our other web properties, including the forums. some that are available only for subscription service customers, but there are a lot of documents. Online help, the knowledge base, and I'll mention this a couple times, when our support engineers actually answer questions, if it's something that other people might run into, they actually write a knowledge base article. So great reference if you're looking for other answers to your questions. 3D Content Central is something we'll add in to My SolidWorks also, so if you're looking for models and other things, you can find that. My.solidworks.com, it's actually available today. You've heard the official announcement this morning. It is a place that you can go to help find some of those resources in one location. Single sign-on, so if you're using the forums and the customer portal, it's the same login. If you go to the customer portal directly from My SolidWorks, you don't have to log in again. Same thing with the forums. Search is probably one of the, there's really two different main experiences with My SolidWorks. One is just browsing our content today. The other is searching. So if you're searching, you can search across all those sources. So if you're looking for information, instead of going to 6 different places, probably not getting your answer from any one of those, one of the reasons we did My SolidWorks is to tie it together. Both from the ability to view what's kind of going on and browse like a magazine view, but also the ability to effectively search. I will also mention that if you start using My SolidWorks, there is a community within the forums. It's right in the help menu of My SolidWorks. We're looking for comments, feedback, and we're very active as far as answering questions in there too. Windows search. So I use Windows search all the time. If I'm looking for something, and I think I'll use the resource monitor a couple times during this discussion, I will not try to figure out what menu I have to go pick, how many different things I need to dive into. I'll just open up the Windows here, go into the Windows search box, and I'll start typing in what I'm looking for. Could be an application, could be a file, could be I just don't know where I even stuck an email. Maybe it's an email, I don't know. It'll look for applications. If I hit the return, it'll give me a whole bunch of things I can look through. There's actually, which isn't used very often, there's actually a way you can filter additional results here in the Windows search. You can do it by type, you can do it by when it's created, so it's a really effective tool, probably underutilized. Even in Windows 8, Windows 8 actually took it a step further. You can actually just start typing. If you're looking for the resource monitor, you don't have to open up anything, you just start typing and it'll bring it up. So Windows search used a lot. If you use network drives, this actually goes to a little document that talks about how to use network drives. All the presentations I did, this one will be available with, at the end of this conference, you'll get an email back to have access to everything. As far as all the bootcamp presentations, I'm going to upload those all inside the forums. I'll make an announcement inside the SolidWorks RSS, that little SolidWorks news thing you see inside of SolidWorks, and I'm also on Twitter at gjankowski. So if, I'll also tweet it when I actually upload it also. The discussion forums, we've talked about these a number of times. Great resource. If you haven't been there yet, you don't have to sign up for an account. You can just go search for things. But if you're looking for answers, especially as administrators or hardware questions, there are a lot of people. A number of them are here this week. That if you want to ask something, you'll get an answer from one of your peers within the community. It's a great location to go research stuff. We also add a number of things like blogs and learning content. Another thing that you'll also find inside the forums, if you ever want to learn about the API or you have API questions, our API team posts a lot of very, very good examples up there that you can go look through. So if you're looking for information, again, you can go to My SolidWorks, but if you're in the forums, it is a really good place just to go ask people about whatever it is you're having a problem with. Or, in particular, if you look at the hardware area, I think that's a great place where people say what makes a difference, and you'll get people giving you really good feedback. And I actually do have, at the end, I'll go through some of the other presentations that are related to these also. Customer, I talked about logging in a couple different times. If you're a SolidWorks customer, or even you're not a customer, you can create a SolidWorks account. It gives you access to the forums, the customer portal, we'll talk about that, and My SolidWorks. Again, the other thing I'd also mention with when you're creating an account, you get an option that, do you have a serial number? The advantage of, if you do have your SolidWorks serial number handy, you don't have to fill out who you are, we know who you are. So we'll fill in the company and everything else for you. So if you have a SolidWorks serial number, it's a little bit better to do that. SolidWorks, so if you go to the support site, there's a lot of resources. You're going to notice they're grouped by product. That's because some of the products, like Draft Site is free product support. The support resources and means of support are different for every product. So we actually just group them here. So if you're looking for SolidWorks or just 3D CAD or simulation or data management or the API, you can just go directly to that section. That's right inside the SolidWorks website under the support area. You can get directly to things like downloads. Again, if you need to get a download, you will have to log in to get to the SolidWorks actual downloads. There'll be free downloads in there, but you need to log in to get to those. Inside the customer portal, so the customer portal, I've highlighted a few areas that I'll list here. You can get to things like the knowledge base. So again, one of the things we've already talked about, you got to go here, 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 here. That's actually also one of the reasons why we did My SolidWorks. So you didn't have to go to 4 different places. Get to the knowledge base. If you do file issues with your resellers, you can actually see the status of those SRs if they've, again, had to escalate that to us. Or if there's bugs attached to that, you can see the status of that also. Enhancement requests. So if you want to make enhancement requests, it's very much like a knowledge base search. You say, what's your enhancement request? Typically, it'll show you a couple different options on existing enhancement requests. If those aren't one of those, you can create a brand new one. My products, so if you are an administrator and you're administering 10 different serial numbers, my recommendation would be to register all 10 of those serial numbers. So you can see what's going on with SRs or anything else. Again, you just get a little more visibility into that. CAD Admin Dashboard. CAD Admin Dashboard is a new subscription service feature that allows you to take a look at a number of different things about your computers that are on your network. So we'll talk about that and how that can be used. Another thing that's available is PhotoView 360 appearances. So if you are, it's also another subscription feature, but if you use PhotoView 360, there's a number of additional Luxology appearances that are available you just link to it and you can get to it. And probably the other area that's used quite a bit is the hardware and graphics, and we'll go over that separately. If you've never used the knowledge base, it's available in 15 different languages. And again, this is created by our support team. If you're looking for an answer, the one thing to realize with our knowledge base, which is going to be very different than the search in My SolidWorks, is it is very much a keyword centric. If you put a long sentence in, you're probably not going to get any results. But if you have an installation error with eDrawings, you might want to say install error eDrawings or installation error, and then you can pick eDrawings from the product list. So the way the knowledge base works, fairly simple terms, you probably get a big bucket of things. You can use filters here to make that smaller. So it's a little bit different. And you look at the search experience in My SolidWorks, that is actually probably a little more traditional. You can put more phrases in, you can put more words in. Any questions? Like I said, if you've got anything we were going through, just please feel free to ask. So networking, computers, and we're going to talk primarily about computers. Computers are the thing, that's your instrument, that's your tool. That's the thing that you make your money on. That's the thing that makes your engineers, if you've got an engineering group, productive. I still believe it's probably one of the more overlooked areas, and it has a lot of potential gains in productivity for your users. Why is it important? Well, stability, performance, maintainability. If those things are important to you, this should be an important topic. And it does directly drive that. Workstation versus desktop versus laptop. I think there is a big move. Most of us probably brought laptops with us. You're seeing a big move that a lot more people just want to use their laptops. Obviously, there's considerations with that. For performance, backups. We'll talk about that a little bit, and also just the price. Obviously, the same performance in a laptop that you get in a workstation is going to cost you an awful lot of money. So there are some trade-offs. A couple things to think about when we go through this is I really want you to take away some things that you can do with your computers to make them more effective. And the fact is there's some tools we'll give you to understand how you spend your money. Rarely do people their boss comes in and says, your computer's too slow, why don't you go out and buy whatever you want? It's probably not the case. If it is the case, that's great, but that's probably not the norm. We do have a lot of resources on our website, and there is an administration area that talks about hardware. So if you're looking for additional resources, those are great resources. And like I said, there's a lot of users that are very active in the hardware area. Charles Culp and Anna Wood, I know, are giving a session about how to put workstations together, and they're not building one this year, they're more talking about it, which I think will be even more valuable. But they give you a lot of perspective on some of the things I'll talk about with what's important, where do you spend your money. Some of the other, when I talked about SolidWorks resources, we have the system requirements page so you can see what the minimum requirements are. And also, I think there's a number of us that fought very hard when we talk about RAM. It's not about minimum RAM, it's about how much you need, and I'll talk about that explicitly. The graphics card page, I'll talk about why that's important. Antivirus, I'll cover also. Hardware. And there's also two other pages here when we talk about benchmarks. So I'll mention the benchmark again, but we also ship the SolidWorks Performance Benchmark with every version of SolidWorks. It allows you to simply just test your machines. Find out what's important. If you have some of your machines that are slow, if they're all configured the same way and something's testing either much faster or much slower than the other ones, it's probably something to investigate there as far as why. But once you do that, you can also share your score. So after you run the benchmark, you can share the score with others. The advantage of that is you can see where your machine kind of lies. If your machine's scoring a total of X and you see that most of the other machines that are testing for SolidWorks are much, much faster than that, it might be time to go back and look at maybe upgrading your computer. We also, if you're on subscription, you can get a comparison report. You can say your machine does this, and here's how it compares against everyone else. The idea behind this is really simple. Is if you go to your boss and you say, we've got really old hardware, we need new computers, they're going to go, so? What does that mean? This gives you actual data. You can actually go back to them with facts and say, this is why you should do it, and look, you can't say that it equates, if it's twice as fast, we're going to get twice as much work done. But you can say, we are losing productivity because our hardware is twice as slow as basically the average computers that are out there. That's actually facts that people will understand. CAD Admin Dashboard. So this is a new feature for 2013. It only reads 2013. So if you've got computers that are on your network that have SolidWorks installed products and have activated and have shared either benchmark scores or have also shared the performance reports, and I'll talk about that also separately, you'll find these machines ending up on the CAD Admin Dashboard. So you as an administrator can log in, you can open up the CAD Admin Dashboard and do a couple different things. First off, you can take one of your machines and it says baseline. Baseline for two different things. You'll see there's tabs across the top. Right here, system options, machine details, RX benchmark, and session details. I'll talk about each one of these. But when you set one of your machines as the baseline, so all the tools option settings that are for that machine and all the, as far as the performance side, it'll look at all your other machines and say, if someone doesn't have the tools option setting the same, list them. Compare this machine against all my other machines on your benchmark, on your network. So all your other computers, you can actually, if you tell them to go ahead and run the benchmark, submit the score, you can actually, as an administrator, call up your machines and say, I don't understand why this person's so much slower or so much faster than everyone else. And that would be something to investigate. Without having to go around and say, did you submit the scores? Can you share the stuff with me? This is just something you can do on a more proactive basis. We'll talk about session details also. We'll talk about that later. There are a number of different benchmarks. The one that comes with SolidWorks is right inside of RX, and you'll see it's on the benchmark page and it runs a performance test. Always recommend, again, when you run the performance test, I always tell people, reboot your computer, don't be running other things, and just let it run. Takes a couple minutes to run through everything. Yes?
Does SolidWorks have something within itself? So say I had two computers that have the same exact benchmarks on it, same exact applications installed, but I've had people that are having, I do system support. Is there something within SolidWorks that works like Task Manager that will let me know what SolidWorks processes are actually running in effect? Yeah,
and I'll run through some of those. We're going to come up, and I actually use the Resource Monitor instead of the Task Manager for a number of reasons. So I'll run through some of those. So if you've got anything after that, let me know. Okay. It also reports the Windows Experience Index, so what? It really just, the Windows Experience Index just tells you how comparable or compatible your version, your computer is to run Arrow, which is the new UI that came out with Windows 7. Yes?
This question isn't silly, but can an admin dashboard run, it runs off of the SolidWorks website, right?
Correct.
Is there any way to run that outside of the SolidWorks website?
Locally, like on your, I don't think there's an option for locally. There is a session on the CAD admin dashboard, and it's by a person from R&D and one of our user experience people. If you're interested in it, definitely go there and share that. So that we're looking for where this goes next too. And just to answer that, I don't think it can completely do that, just because of some of the other information. It would be hard to go get that locally. So I don't know if it can. I think parts of it could, but parts of it just couldn't run locally. You wouldn't have access to all the information you need. Computer configuration. So we're going to go over all these different areas. Just quickly on your operating systems, XP is not supported for 2013, and Vista, if you're using Vista, please go use something else, anything else. If you're using Vista, I'm actually shocked, but Vista won't be supported for 2014. If you're using Vista, it is the every other operating system for Microsoft. Please go use, get yourself Windows 7, x64. You will be much, much happier. Something I've mentioned for the last couple years, I think it was probably starting about 2-3 years ago, I said that x64 should be the dominant operating system for our customers. It absolutely is, by a lot. If you're not using x64 as an operating system, and you're not using Windows 7 yet, and you're still on XP or anything else, you need to make plans to move. The operating systems aren't supported. It's not our decision. You need to move to Windows 7 or Windows 8, but it needs to be x64, and I'll cover that in the next topic. If it's not, unless you do really small stuff and you don't do a lot of things at the same time, I can almost run, well, I can't do that anymore because I have 8 gigabytes of RAM on my laptop. You can run a computer out of 2 gigabytes of RAM very quickly. Outlook, Office, 1 or 2 other applications, then you start SolidWorks and it's gone. And that's before you do anything. If you're using, again, that's one of the reasons why you want to have a 64-bit operating system. I will still, if anyone's still using a 3 gigabyte switch, you need not to. It was a trick, it was a hack that you could do with XP. And in my opinion, it just moves crashes around. It was a way to kind of somewhat access a little more memory in Windows XP. And if you're using it, really try to move to a 64-bit Windows 7, Windows 8 platform sooner than later. RAM, how much? This is a really good article. And again, if you want to read the whole article, they're all linked in here. So all these links are linked to some other technical article. But when people ask how much RAM, it depends. It depends. What do you call up in there today? If I call up 4 applications and then I call up a large assembly, it's probably different than someone that, all I ever do is work on SolidWorks during the day. I have smaller parts and assemblies. Those differences are going to be significant. You need enough RAM. One of the reasons, this is in priority order. You need a good operating system that supports more than 2 gigabytes of RAM, which is a 64-bit, and you need enough RAM to actually make a difference. I just actually listed here, and you can see this is the resource monitor. The reason I like using the resource monitor over Control-Alt-Delete in the task manager is you get a much better, you get an easier to read thing. You got so much physical memory used, you got so much unused, and you have so much available. It's really simple terms. You'll also notice sometimes these numbers don't completely jive with what you see in the task manager. So I actually always tell people use the resource. You'll see the resource monitor when I talk about CPU, when I talk about disk, and I talk about network. Very flexible tool, it's pretty simple to use, easy to understand. Down here at the bottom, we're going to talk about, again, how much money do you spend on I know it's a little hard, but you get this with RAM, you get this with CPU. I could buy 12 gigabytes of RAM for $340. That's pretty cheap. Actually, when I aftermarketed the RAM for the 8 gigabytes for my laptop, it was $40. So having that discussion about RAM, how much, when people are saying, well, we're only going to put 2 gigabytes of RAM in there. Oh, and we do large assemblies. And we're having problems. And I've had those discussions, by the way. I say, yeah, I understand. You can't do it. Once you run out of physical memory, which is why this is important, stability and performance both go through the floor, and very, very quickly. And if you have a 64-bit operating system, which I do on my laptop, I have 8 gigabytes of RAM. I can access 8 gigabytes of RAM. When I had 4 gigabytes on there originally, and I had a 32-bit operating system, and they gave it to me originally, once I was past 2, I was done. I mean, there's always some stuff where it does, it'll try to use different things and it'll flip things around, but you need enough RAM. I also don't think when you talk about this that you need to go say, I need 96 gigabytes of RAM and add $6,600 just in RAM on that computer. So there are trade-offs, and that's what I'm saying. You need enough. And this article does talk about it. It's very simple. Open up you basically open up what you normally deal with in the day. Open up the resource monitor, watch it for a bit. See how much RAM you're actually consuming. You need enough so they're not running out of physical RAM. That's the whole key. CPU. Probably, again, after RAM, because I don't think RAM should be an issue for $100 or $200, personally. CPU is probably the most important investment you're going to make in your computer, and it's the most confusing by far. You'll see pages. Here's a page on a workstation. So it has everything from, I can go a little bit faster for $240, or I can spend $3,300 extra on my computer. What makes a difference? I think that's hard. I think there's a couple different things I would recommend. I'd look at 3 different things. I'd look at the type and speed. So again, it's a quad core. Do you need multiple CPUs when you're just running SolidWorks? No. Question always comes up, with multiple cores or multiple CPUs, what takes advantage inside of SolidWorks? There are someone asked hyper-threaded yesterday, sorry. There are multi-threaded options inside of SolidWorks, like opening drawings, printing, opening documents, but the main one, which is rebuilding, still is a single-threaded application process. So again, having a faster CPU, a little bigger cache is going to help. Having a quad core, whatever is probably, having a number of different cores available, great idea. If I was just buying it in here, I'd probably go and maybe add a little more money, but I don't think I'd add, more than a couple $100 to that, to the way it's configured. The only way you can also really tell, and then I'll come over to you, the only way you can really tell is to actually get test numbers. So if you had test numbers based on the SolidWorks benchmark, at least you'd be able to tell. The problem is all the different the non-CAD benchmarks aren't a real-world comparison. Just because there's, some other benchmark out there that tells you it's fast, does that mean it really relates to SolidWorks? Maybe, maybe not. Yes?
Is SolidWorks architected to run on multiple threads?
Everything except for the rebuild process, which is probably the biggest one. Right now, that is still a single-threaded application. Process. So if you want to actually look at how much you're using, which is another good thing to do, you can use the resource monitor, and there's a CPU tab. And you can let this run, you can log it, you can kind of see what's going on. Understanding what's happening with your performance. The resource monitor, I do highly recommend. It'll look at your CPUs. Sometimes it doesn't make sense with what it sees, but if you're always pegged out and you're trying to do things, again, that might be a place that you need to invest in. Graphics card, probably the thing I'd say about that is really just a couple quick things. Game cards, what you're getting when you get a certified card, and we list certified cards on our website. You'll see many of those partners in the partner pavilion, is the driver. That driver is tested and certified by us. It's tested and certified by the vendor. We agree on what those are. And if we have a problem that's specific to a graphics card, we will get support directly from the vendor, and there'll be an addition or an update to that graphics card driver at some point. So know what the versions are on the graphics card driver website. You can also run it in RX. You can also get it from the CAD admin dashboard. You can do it from any of those areas, but understanding what we say is important and what the vendor says is important, that does make a difference. The other thing to realize is if you bought your system from one of the partners, that version number for that card, if you went directly to the card vendor, may be different. So go back, you'll actually see in the graphics card page, it'll allow you to select, it'll tell, do you want to select, did you buy the graphics card separately, or did it come with your computer? If it did come with your computer, it's going to say, I had a Dell, I had this, That's the driver number. Yes?
Do you have any documentation on what settings to apply to it?
So also the graphics card page, if there are any specific settings that are recommended, they're all listed there. So, you know, one thing to do when if you haven't done it, or if you're looking for, you know, upgraded version of SolidWorks, one of the first things I do, go to the graphics card page, make sure there's a driver for that and matches what you've got. The settings, there seems to be less and less required. I think that used to be much more common, where you had to do certain settings for SolidWorks. I don't think it's as prevalent, but we do list them if they're recommended. OpenGL, so, you know, the background, and I'll just run to the next one very quickly, is as far as performance, probably the best, if you're having performance problems, whether it's with your hardware or size of your models, anything like that, probably the best thing to do is turn your edges off, is just go to a shaded display. Edges can account for up to 50% of the frame, of painting a frame. So if there's X amount of frames per second, 50% of that can be actually done by edges and some of the real view stuff. So if you're having a performance issue, you've got a big assembly, you've got a big part, if you just use the shaded mode, that's one of the things you can do. Also, there's a level of detail settings inside the system options. You know, again, I usually crank it fairly low. Level of detail is when I start rotating something, you'll see a lot of things go, you know, blocky and chunky, and it doesn't affect your model, but it doesn't also make it repaint every one of those frames when you're trying to rotate something. So if you're having issues with hardware, that's actually something you can do. Software OpenGL. Software OpenGL, very good tool. If you're having a problem with a machine, there's probably two things I always recommend. If it's something you just can't figure out, you know, this person's, yeah, I don't know why this person's having a problem and no one else is. There's two safe modes inside. You can do this manually, but there are two safe modes which inside of SolidWorks RX. You start up SolidWorks RX right at the bottom of the main page. It says if you're having problems, you can go to two safe modes. First one is Software OpenGL. So you don't run with hardware acceleration. You can see if it's a graphics card issue. Is it a graphics card driver? Is it something else? The software, you could do this yourself, but you have to open up SolidWorks, make sure you don't have a document open, and then go use Software OpenGL. You do not want to use Software OpenGL for production work. It is going to be very slow. So if you're running your computer right now and the only way you can make it run effectively is in Software OpenGL, you need to look for a new driver, a new graphics card, or something. You shouldn't run SolidWorks in Software OpenGL. The other safe mode setting, just by the way, inside of SolidWorks RX is the ability to turn off the tools, all the tools option settings. Basically go to factory defaults and all your add-ins. It's a one-time only thing, but there's those two safe modes will tell you if it's your graphics card, or the other one could tell you, is it something with your option settings, potentially from older versions being converted, or potentially an add-in inside of your system. So those are two things that if someone's having a problem that just seems random, it's not the same as other users, it's something you can check out and use. Disk. So what to look for? It's file I/O. It also impacts the just the general operation of the system. So a couple things you want to look for. Type, if you're using standard drives, using a RAID configuration, which takes more than one drive and blends those together like a RAID level 0, will actually stripe between two drives, which will increase performance. Or, even on my laptop, I run the SolidWorks benchmark on my laptop. My numbers for disk drives is awesome. As far as everything else that runs SolidWorks, it is horrible. But for a disk drive, it's really good. So solid state drives, excellent to use. I really recommend them. The price is coming down and the performance is very good. And type of thing, yep, someone had a question? Yes?
Would you recommend solid state drives if you're running a FEA?
I would recommend solid state drives for anything where you want to increase disk access, period. I mean, it's just one of those things since I've started using them, I really like it. And even on a laptop, I mean, they can make them small enough. You don't also have to worry about, when I talk about system maintenance, the other advantage of solid state, you don't have to worry about defragging your drives. They don't fragment. So that's another huge advantage. Things that you look for is obviously size, speed, and data transfer. That's actually something on the CPU side. I go back to CPU. I did want to mention that very quickly. There is another rate, something else that you'll see that's often listed is transformations per second. Basically, how much stuff can it shove through that processor? That is another gauge I look at. It does tell you how much stuff can this thing do. And many of the vendors will list that. And again, testing and benchmark scores. Policies, just when you manage computers. If you're an administrator, how do you install software? Do you let everyone just install stuff? Do you have any, common practices? So if you've got large assemblies, you've got someone that's got a lot of problems with SolidWorks, and you walk over, and they've got their music streaming on their computer, and they got YouTube up and running, and they got 14 other things up and running. Stuff happens. Get a MP3 player if you're going to listen to music. So if you're having problems, especially if you're pushing SolidWorks a lot, if you've got big assemblies, I think it's a great practice. I think also from a productivity standpoint, I'd shut everything else down. I've worked with some customers that have actually done that. They basically said, when you're designing, that's your design time. You turn your Outlook off. I've turned, even Outlook, I think, is a big distractor, even when you're designing. I've turned all the notifications off. If I want to go read my email, I'll go read my email. We are, I think, in many cases distracted by that and have too many things running all at the same time. If they need them, those things, they need them, but I think there's lots of people that just because you can run 280 things at the same time doesn't mean that you should. Life cycle planning. I firmly believe in this concept. Just because you have a new designer come in the group doesn't mean they're going to go get the new box. It was always with me a strict hand-me-down process. When I was managing CAD systems, the people who pushed the hardware the most, FEA guys, the guys doing really, really big assemblies, maybe even some of your best designers who you're looking for the most output. They literally, I would tell them, new guys coming in, guess what? You just got a new computer. And that person would have an appropriate hardware. Now, I also managed the computers in a way that we could easily re-ghost and re-image computers, so we could easily move them around. But give that some thought. Just because someone's walking in the door doesn't mean they should get the latest, greatest computer. I always think that you apply your resources wherever they're most best served. And if you've got someone that is, and when I was, my last, design CAD job, is we had people that literally had to sit there waiting for their computer to run simulations, bringing up extremely large assemblies. Those people needed hardware. And when we bought hardware, that hardware usually went somewhere else. Creating a consistent platform. So I just talked about that. So if someone new walked in the door, how do you go pull out the Windows CDs? If something happens to my laptop on the way home here, what do I do? Well, I have an image sitting somewhere. I just go pop that CD in, and I have a restore point. There's a system restore available inside of Windows. You don't have to buy anything if you don't want to. You can buy ghosting or imaging software, and it's pretty good, and it's good stuff. But you can also just do it inside of Windows. So I'll talk about this a couple times. We all carry laptops, or most of us do. Many of us do. We have stuff on it. Just think about what happens if you walked across the courtyard here and you accidentally dumped your computer in the pond, or it fell off. I mean, things happen. And you need to prepare for the worst, which means if your stuff isn't backed up, and that is including your laptop. My laptop is actually still being backed up because I use an online version for backups on top of it, on top of my regular ones. Just think about what risk you're assuming, and that's exactly what you're doing. And I know I've had some people that have said, well, we can't get our engineers to back up their laptops. You know what? Tough. Either they don't do their work outside of the office, or you say, I'm going to put something on your computer, and it'll just be automatically backed up every day. You got to make sure you're protecting your data. If you're administrators here and you're responsible for the intellectual property of your company, which is exactly what your design data is, you've got to make sure it's safe. Antivirus, I'll talk about this quickly during the install side of things, but you could, if you chose, many antivirus applications will allow you to exclude certain file types. So if you're opening up large assemblies and you don't want to have to scan SLD, ASM, PRT, and DRW files every time you open that, you could potentially turn that off if you're willing to assume that risk. The network, I would say probably the biggest thing there is making sure that you do have good access in the network. If you're bringing your files down, whether it's from your PDM system where you're creating a local vault, or heaven forbid that you're actually all accessing the same files on the same network drive, the network does make a difference when you're accessing files. This is probably one of the things, and I know I make a point of this every time I talk, and there's very good reason for it. System maintenance, if you don't do it today, you absolutely need to. I'm talking about defragging your disks, all the different things that actually within RX, we do a couple things. It's all standard Windows stuff. We get rid of your SolidWorks specific temporary files. We get rid of all the other temporary files. We can do a check disk. We can do a defrag, just the Windows defrag, and we can have it scheduled for you. Even if you do maintenance, have it scheduled. I tell this story probably every year, but the only time you run into problems with your computers, where it starts running slow and everything else, is when you've got a deadline. You're working late, someone's waiting for something. I mean, this always invariably happens to me around SolidWorks World time. I'm going 2,000 miles an hour, and I'm starting to wonder why my computer's starting to slow up. Why does it take 10 seconds to open a browser window? Whatever it is, it always seems to happen. I run automatic maintenance once weekly. I use another utility I'll talk about here at the end. But I do complete maintenance on my system weekly. I even had to run this one other time earlier last week because my machine just started getting sluggish. I ran it, things were just, again, very, very, they were much quicker, I know, noticeably. System maintenance will make a difference on performance reliability on your system. If you don't do it today, you don't have to buy anything. You can just use what's out of the box with Windows, but make sure it's scheduled. If there's one thing you take away from this, is it's something as an administrator I would force onto other computers. I would do whatever it took to make sure they're doing it. Because I've seen multiple cases where people are having all kinds of problems, and we look, their disk drive is wildly fragmented, there's all kinds of errors all over the place, and yeah, guess what? They're having a problem. You make your money, your company makes your money on you guys using your computers. Take care of them. Would they treat a machine tool in your shop the same way? I don't think so, but I think computers should be treated that way. A couple different, if you do have a non-SSD drive, there's free tools that come with Windows. There's additional ones that you can get that do a little more, some other options about your paging file, master table file, all sort of things. We've used and tested a couple different utilities, not an endorsement, but I use System Mechanic. Absolutely love it. It's one of those things that it'll look for registry errors. I'm surprised at what it reports, even when I run it weekly. So those sort of things. Even just trying this on one of your computers, I think it's somewhat of an eye-opening experience. But there's lots of things that you can do that are either free or cost a little bit of money. Installation. So again, we've got a lot of very good references on installation. We've done a lot of things with the installation manager and installation with SolidWorks. One of the things that was I really liked, and you may or may not have noticed, we made a change in how we use the Windows installer. What does that mean? Well, it means when you go from Service Pack 1 to 2, all of a sudden you're looking at some much smaller file. You're not downloading 8 gigabytes every time you have to do a Service Pack update. So our viewpoint is installation is never easy enough. I think it's gotten a lot easier, and we're going to talk about just a couple things very quickly. Installation manager, it's smart. It determines what you need, what you have to get. The reason that and a lot of people when we first came out with this was say, oh no, you know what? I can go do all the manual downloads myself, and it's less. The only reason it's less is because they didn't get everything. One of the big reasons why we did the installation manager was the fact that if you remember back in those days, we used to have a list of things if you wanted to download. So if you downloaded a service pack, you had to go through this list of things. Open this, install that, and open this, install that. Well, people would pick different things. They wouldn't pick them all. They would also pick them in different order. So guess what happened from a reliability standpoint with installations? They were very hard to debug. So the installation manager was really designed to say, hey, this is what you have. This is what you can update and allow you to control that very easily. Okay. There's 3 different methods you can use. You can walk around with DVDs. You can get a deployment application like, it used to be SMS from Microsoft. It's now called something else now at this point. I used to use applications like that. They really were good. They were really effective. They do cost money for licensing. And again, there is setup and maintenance to get those sort of tools to work. So, we found a lot of our customers in particular didn't do it. So that's why we use administrative images from the installation manager. It allows you to create an installation on your network and configure it, and then you can actually deploy it to your users. The other advantage that when you're actually upgrading your computers, you go upgrade that admin image, and it's going to upgrade your clients. I wouldn't walk around with DVDs if I had more than 2 machines. In fact, I have 2 machines. I still use an admin image. Just allows me to configure it, and I can deploy updates easier. It's much simpler. Before you do an installation, I have a number of points on here, but you should make a list. It's amazing what sort of things you may or may not forget. I've done that myself, like rolling out a new version at one point in time and the printers didn't work. That didn't go over very well. So even just having a simple list, checklists aren't a bad thing. And part of that checklist should be communicating to your customers, and I'll use that term a couple times. If you're an admin, people that are using your software are your customers. I always think as an admin or an IT person, I very much was a believer that we viewed people, our fellow employees, as customers. You should communicate with them to know that they know what's coming on, they know what's coming, they know what's going to change, they aren't surprised, they aren't all of a sudden seeing that you're upgrading the system at 10 o'clock on Friday, but you didn't realize they had a huge project going on and now you just took them down. Communication and getting some of that buy-in from your customers is very important. Other items here as far as all customized files, templates, toolbox, whatever, should be in a separate location on the network and shared, so it's backed up. Antivirus applications, and I'll talk about this very quickly. If you're having problems with installation, I know there's the urban legends that are on the forums and everything else. You should take antivirus off, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. People are telling you that, they're just guessing. And we have a list of antivirus applications that we support and we test every day. If your application's on that list, you do not ever have to uninstall or take your antivirus application offline. First off, there's log files. If you have a problem with your installations, you should be looking at your log files, and then if you can't interpret those, you send those to your reseller. Your log files are going to tell you exactly what's wrong without people guessing and having you spend hours blindly hunting on, no, maybe turn this off or do this. The log files will tell you or they're hard to interpret in some cases on what's really wrong, but a support person can go through those and actually figure out what is wrong. Also, if you're doing the admin and images, so if you're going to do that, you can set it up. There's also a way with the option editor. You can set up multiple groups. You can define how things are defined. With 2013, nice feature, you can actually push the first release as an administrator. So I actually did that from my workstation, my laptop. I gave it my admin credentials, my password, and I said, go ahead and start installing it right now. So you can actually push that to a machine that doesn't have admin credentials now, which is a big thing. You can deploy 32-bit or 64-bit images. You can decide how, you can also, very importantly, is configure that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So you can configure that whole experience, that SolidWorks version, when they call it up, it will be configured with everything. Everything will be set up the right way you want it. You don't have to ever go touch that client machine. Everything just works. If you're uninstalling or changing things, you'll go to the control panel, and then it'll call up the installation manager and give you a bunch of options, including the ability that you can completely uninstall. So when you're going on uninstall, you're going to see an advanced option page, and it gives you a bunch of options saying, do you want to save this? Do you want to save this? Do you want to do this? So if you want to, for the most part, outside of the add-ins, any other system component, we don't go back and remove system components. So if we install the VB or something on VBA on your computer, we don't go back and uninstall those system components because we don't know if another application is using it. And we just can't go and say, yeah, well, that's one we might have installed. We're going to go get rid of it. But otherwise, it leaves your registry clean, it cleans up your directories, it leaves your system as a complete clean uninstall. There's also a tech tip on that. Only thing I also want to mention is service packs. You can have multiple major versions. If I wanted SolidWorks 2012 and SolidWorks 2013 on the same computer, you can do that. Two things I recommend is that you come up with the installation directory. I would call one SolidWorks 2013, the other one SolidWorks 2012. The data directory should be SolidWorks Data 2012, 2013. So name them explicitly. Don't just do SolidWorks 28 at the end of it, which means you've got a whole bunch of other old programs you've uninstalled. Installation errors, like I said, this is if you're looking for the log files, you can do that. If you're having problems, the installation manager, you right mouse button on the title bar, and you can actually set the logging level. If you're really having problems, the engineer might ask you to do the highest logging level. Then when you do an installation, it's going to dump a really big file. But that really big file will tell someone exactly what is going wrong, not based on something that you might have heard from someone who might have had the same problem, might not have had the same problem. So best practices when you're administering SolidWorks. You don't need 450-page illustrated, hardcover bound CAD standards for your company. But what you should have is hey, if you get a file, think of it this way. If you get a file from one of your coworkers, what do you expect when you open it up? Do you expect to spend the next 2 days trying to figure out what that person did? There's a lot of things that you can do that you can agree upon, and there's ways to enforce, and I'll talk about that. That, if you open it up, did they use external references? And if they did, what do you do with it? I don't think you should break them, but you might want to lock them so that you don't have any other external references are always there, but they're not driving the design. What do you do with assembly structures? Everything flat. What do you do with part modeling? Do you do all the major features first, keep all the cosmetic things last? There's simple things like that. Or do you do really, and I asked this, do you do really bad things, like let people edit text on dimensions? So instead of changing something, they just go and change the text. I don't think you should do that. But again, having simple standards like that is important. They don't have to be complex. Document them, share them with your users, have a user group meeting, say, or design review. What do you check in a design review? What did you do? Did you do these things? Same thing on the hardware. These are a bunch of references, so if you're looking for what do I look for, these are all good references on type of things that you can look for, but just think about it. If you're just opening up someone's assembly or a part or a new design, what are you going to look for? Where did they put the drawings? What'd they name them? What'd they name your parts? Anything that can simply get you in there and make you effective when you open up someone else's design, that's probably the most important thing to have a standard on. The other thing that, when checking standards, and I agree, you could have this big, you got to have 2 decimal places, blah, blah, but who's going to spend the time at the end to go through someone's design in detail? Who has time for that? You just don't have time for it. And there's always excuses by the designers. It takes too long, I'm late, the sun's in my eyes, dog ate my CAD standards, all kinds of different things. They always come up with an excuse for it. But if you have anything above the base package of SolidWorks, there's what's called the SolidWorks Design Checker. Highly underused application. It's a great tool. Even for just doing this. Think if I used contractors a lot, so these people would come and go. I try to get CSWPs. I try to get people that are good with SolidWorks. But, these are, if I used a lot, how did I know how they got those designs done? How do you trust that? That even is with your design team. How do you know you didn't forget something? So, here's a couple great examples. I created this in about a minute. Check for overridden dimensions. Text check. Did you do that? Or if it's a part, are the references locked or were they frozen? All those sort of things you can set up with a simple check for parts, assemblies, drawings. There's different checks for everything. You can run that in a couple minutes. You can run it in the task scheduler. It's all very simple. But you can then take someone's design, at least guess what? If it pops up, they didn't do these 10 things, no custom properties. They didn't put a drawing standard in. They didn't define a material. Think of all those things that you just normally don't have time to check. You can say, hey, call it up. You have a design review of parts. Maybe you'd ask them, hey, I want to see the design checker report. And if they don't have it, guess what? Run it. It takes no time to set this up or use it. Also, there's, you know, there are some things that also auto-correct, and you can also report from that. A couple things about configuring SolidWorks is, you know, you should never deploy with default settings. Maybe if you're yourself, but I actually, even if I was a single person, I don't deploy SolidWorks on my laptop with the default settings. I have my templates someplace. Because, you know, I have certain things I've customized, so I always go point to that. There's always something probably under the file locations that you should customize. As an administrator, I would walk through all the options, every release. What's new? Maybe what do we want to change? Maybe we want to rethink that, you know, whether we open up parts, you know, lightweight, what do we do with that? You know, all those different options. I know there's a lot there, but, you know, go through those each time. It doesn't take that long. I always create a brand new option file every time, just as an exercise, because then I know I've gone through everything. Outside the directory locations, that's all I've got to add again. Also on document templates. So remember, all those system settings, if you do File New in SolidWorks when you get back to your office, and you see the default part assembly and template, or part assembly and drawing, please define some other templates. So I'll talk about custom properties. You know, let's just say your engineers always design in 5 different materials. Do you really want them maybe going through and you got to do this when you start a part. You got to do this. Oh, remember to define your materials. Why don't you just give them, hey, here's our 3 materials. Because guess what? If you set up templates that are nice, maybe it's a C-size drawing for sheet metal. It's got standard notes on it. So you already set up a drawing that's got all the default views on it. It's got the template on it. When they have to create a drawing, all they do is, oh, guess what? I can create this. It's simple, it's easy, it's consistent. Save work for people will take the shortest path or the path of least resistance. So if you can make that path something that already does a lot of the work for them and make sure you don't do mistakes and there aren't, all those custom properties are set, all the property values are set correctly, why not do that? And that's why, you know, the system settings, those are things you should define, and the document properties are very, very important. Custom properties, I also want to mention, I never let users edit the title block, ever. No edit sheet. You did everything with custom properties. That way, when we use stuff downstream for custom properties, or we didn't have this piece of the title block that's flying out here, or worse yet, on a part, someone would insert a part, they'd type in the material 9 times out of 10 didn't match what the actual part was. You know, the material, the custom properties inside of SolidWorks also can say, hey, what type of material is this from this part? So again, you set it once. Why would you want to set a material property in the part, which you should do, and then have to go back in the drawing and retype it again? And invariably, it's going to be wrong. So, you know, templates, custom properties, these are all simple things to do that can make your users more effective. SolidWorks settings, you know, when you actually go through, I still think that the best practice, I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that clean uninstall, so you get rid of all those registry settings, I think is a good thing. You know, you can have SolidWorks versions, you know, you could open up your SolidWorks settings and you could see all these things. So as a convenience, when you uninstall SolidWorks by default, we leave your settings in from the previous version. When you open up the next version the next time, it brings those settings in. It's a convenience. But also realize if you've been using that convenience for the last 10 years on your computer and you see things all the way, this was a screenshot, all the way back to SolidWorks 2000, that convenience may be causing you problems because you've converted this, which converted that, which converted this, which converted that. I would recommend cleaning those out. Clean uninstall will actually do that. Copy settings wizard, easy way to get things out. You can also have your users get their keyboard shortcuts, system option, you know, their menu customizations and anything else they have customized. You just care about the system options. The SolidWorks task scheduler, I mentioned the design checker before, but also if you're an administrator, another thing I'd recommend is that you have a set of test data that you can run. So if I want to go to the next service pack of SolidWorks or next version of SolidWorks, I'd load it on my computer. As a test, I'd take a big set of my data and I'd just let it run, convert files overnight. You know, when I come back in, well, guess what? If there's a bunch of errors sitting on things, you know, one of the things you don't want to find as a surprise, you go to the next version of SolidWorks, for whatever reason, if a file didn't open, that's not a good experience one of your customers or your users are going to have when they open up that version of SolidWorks. So just doing that is a very simple test. What's going on? CAD admin dashboard, it'll tell you about supported drivers, so you can look at what you can set flags to say this machine doesn't have the right driver. You can also do some session, so that's all the machine details. I talked about RX, and I'll talk about the other one, session details at the end. Toolbox, this happened in the last release, but we removed the Access database, so you don't share a toolbox part with someone and they get the 6-foot fastener. So all the toolbox information is now stored with that. The other thing I would recommend from an administration standpoint is I would also strip out the other 14 standards that are in there, only give them what they need, and even give them maybe only the sizes and bolts and hardware that you actually want them to use. Training, the one thing I'd say about training, everyone's different, and you should have a plan for everyone. And the other thing I would do is also mention mentoring. Most of us all have that person that always answers a lot of the questions. It's that go-to, your super user. Instead of making it a burden for them, why don't you give them a benefit? And it's not cash, by the way. That's not the most effective way to reward people. It might be a SolidWorks world. It might be let them go take their CSWP test or e-test. Maybe give them a part of that recognition during the year. There's ways to recognize those people, but make it so it's not a burden. Make it a part of your actual training, because they're going to do it anyways. And if they always go over to this person and he says, well, now I got to take time out of my day. If it really is something that is part of their job and they're also rewarded against it, it does make your other designers more effective. Lots of different ways you can get additional training resources. Probably I'm going to keep this pretty quick, but managing your data is extremely important. Your IP, and I talked about this before, bad things happen. Think about Superstorm Sandy. There's all kinds of natural disasters. Ask yourself this, if you are your CAD manager, I don't care what the IT group says, you are still responsible for the IP of your company, for your design, for your engineering department. What would happen, again, God forbid, if something happened, you walk back to your company next week and it was under 10 feet of water? Are your designs safe? And you need to understand whether they are. So if you work with your IT group, if they're the ones making the backups, whoever does that, you need to understand what their strategy is, what offsite is. And I'll tell 2 quick stories I usually share with this, and they're both true, and they both happened to me. Last CAD IT group I managed, I walked in the first day and I asked the IT guys that were there, I said, how are we making our backups and how safe are we? And they gave me a really good description. We're off site, we rotate these, we have the schedule, we know that we really are completely covered. I said, that's great. I just modified this file. I'd like what that file looked like yesterday. They spent the rest of the day in the back room. They came back later that day and said, we have a serious problem. We have one of our tape heads is actually defective. It wasn't reporting it, and all of our tapes are 0 bytes for the last 2 months. True story. If you have backups, you got to be able to. You need to test recovery, because also I've been through, and then we went through an ISO audit at the same time. The auditor actually said the same thing to me. That's great. I want these files from this day. Please get them. When you get them, let me know, because they actually do test it. The other one I call the forklift test. Is we had a really good server. I mean, it was powerful, multiple CPUs, all hot swappable drives. It was a really good server. All of our engineering data was on that one machine. And one of the IT guys came to me one day and said, Greg, we have a really serious problem. The forklift driver just drove through our back wall, and the server was split in 2. And it's not the time to ask yourself, what then? So I just want to make the point that your data is really important. You need to understand under really bad situations what's going to happen to that. You don't want to figure out what that means afterwards. Also, I'd say that applies to any sort of laptops you might have with you too. Think about what happened again, if you're walking across the road here and what happened to that computer. Don't trust anything. It's not if it might happen, it does happen. It's happened to me multiple times over my career. So again, the other thing I want you to take away from this is if you are using the Windows Explorer as a semi-data management tool, please don't. You're putting your company at risk. You're making your company less productive. There's lots of very good tools. And here's the point I'm going to make. I've seen most schemes people have had for, we've got work in progress in this directory, and all I do is copy these files here, and it goes here, and I have a bunch of things under my reference path. We never have a problem with this. Until the day comes where you make the wrong part, or again, you're probably sitting there at 11 o'clock at night where you got to ship the following day something to a vendor so they can make your tool, and all of a sudden this part that you swore was already changed and already updated is now something that looks completely different. It does happen. If you use the Windows Explorer, I don't care what rules, what sort of great scheme you have for directories and how good you are, someone at SolidWorks created 13 rules in priority order that no matter what you did, this is how it's going to figure out what is actually the latest file. And if you want to run your design department based on this, you're asking at some point for trouble. I got to be just really blunt with that. You want to make sure that, again, you can control your data. There's lots of tools out there. There's lots of people in the partner pavilion. You can take this back to your management. You know, I firmly believe you're putting your engineering data at risk. You don't have design accountability. You can't run multiple revisions. You can't easily change things without really knowing where everything is. And in my last design position, we had to have design accountability for each motorcycle we actually sent out. So if someone came back and said, at this date we had this assembly and it was this part number, I need the revision that was on this piece out here. We actually needed to do that from a true liability standpoint. And you know, not only are you less productive, but you might very well have liability issues if you're managing data with a Windows Explorer. And it is that serious. So again, if you're doing that, there's lots of tools out there. This is not talking about what tools to use, but you need to manage your data. Very quickly on troubleshooting, we created, why report files? Why report issues? I know it's hard. I know there's, it'd be great if there were easier ways to do it. Don't assume that if you're having a problem, that someone else has reported it. The other thing that I also want to share is that we also prioritize our issues and what bugs we fix based on not only the severity of the issue, but also how many people have reported it. I know it's hard. I know it's a pain. But again, report the issues. It does make a difference. Provide much detail. We'll ask you about business impact. We'll look for other files. And the other thing we'll do is, talk to you about RX. And we'll talk about RX in just a minute here. Lots of things I talked about. I talked about the safe modes. You want to make sure you isolated the environments. That you get it as simple as possible. Get them off the, whatever it is. There's lots of ways to simplify it. But these are just some suggestions. What's changed? Is it reproducible? Can you do this on another machine? Have I been logged in for 3 days and I'm still having a problem? There's all kinds of things that you can do to just simplify it. The thing I would say about troubleshooting anything is you've got to simplify the problem and you've got to take it step by step. I've been involved with a lot of troubleshooting situations where it's very, very, very complex. You look at it, you don't even know where to start. You just start right from the beginning, step one, as simple as you can get, and there's a number of things that you can do if you're trying to reproduce or find out who's having a problem and why they're having it. But that is really kind of leads me to SolidWorks RX. SolidWorks RX was created for, I think, a very simple purpose, is that when you need support from someone, the last thing you want to do is answer the 20 questions. What kind of graphics card do you have? What drivers you're running? What version of SolidWorks you're running? Blah, blah, all these different things that you don't care. And quite frankly, it's very hard to get all that information for a support engineer. So RX will package all that. And you can also create videos with it. So you can actually create a video of your problem. So if it's a reproducible problem, I do this to this file. That's something that might be worth a video that you send to an engineer. Give them the files, you can package those with, and you're all set. These are all the things that come with it. It gives the engineer a lot of information. The other thing I would recommend also, I think when you were asking the question earlier about the event manager, is the event logs are also extremely useful sometimes when you're looking at problems. In fact, I just had one on my laptop and I couldn't figure out why this problem was happening. Sure enough, I look in the event log, I could see what application it was, and I went, no, well, now I know what that is. So it's one of those tools that the engineers will use. CAD admin dashboard, if you've submitted things, it'll actually show in the session details. So if this person says, I'm crashing, I'm having problems with SolidWorks every day. and I go back in the CAD admin dashboard, I see, well, okay, I see that you had a couple sessions here, and I see these two ended abnormally. That's all it's going to tell you. You can set a date range, and you can see how long their sessions run, how many they've had, and if they've abnormally exited. So if someone's having random, which isn't random, by the way, or a crashing problem, you can actually go back and take a look to see when they've happened, what machines, again, it gives you some numeric thing to go look at least for starting to do the, I talked about the event, the performance monitor a little bit, but more the event viewer and the resource monitor. There's also some very good tools if you are more of a higher level support person that our support person, people and the reseller support people use, like Process Monitor and Explorer. It really gives you a full view on what's happening with that computer. But again, that's fairly advanced. And again, some of the resources, the knowledge base, and some of the other things we've already talked about. Performance logs. So I've talked about sending in performance logs for the CAD admin dashboard. And what this does, we use this for really two things. Well, three things now with the CAD admin dashboard, which is for your purpose, is we look at if someone abnormally crashed, if they crash SolidWorks, we'll send a generic crash log file back to the server. What we use that for has been very successful is our R&D team will take it and they'll look for commonality. Oh, it's kind of going always in this area, or it's always in this place. And so they'll actually go do projects that'll be based on why are we having a problem with this? It doesn't tell us necessarily what the cause is, but it tells us what's happening and gives us an idea where what things are actually happening with that. And also you get it from the CAD dashboard. Completely anonymous, there's no machine details or design details in there. Yes?
This error report, will it be sent by default, or is there any interaction necessary?
Sometimes it'll pop up after you've crashed. It'll say, do you want to send this to SolidWorks? And you can send notes on it too. So there is a setting that turns it on and off, and it's not, I don't think it's on by default, so you should have them turn it on. And if you've crashed, and when you restart, it'll actually ask you if you want to send that. So it does at least tell you what to do. Being a good CAD manager, I've talked about listening, to your customers. One thing you should absolutely do is talk to your CAD users. Hey, what's going on? What's good? But also find out, where are you spending your time that, is probably non-value added. I always got to do these 20 things when I release a design. What sort of things where it's non-value added tasks, where they create their mistakes, and what are the things that are causing them the most pain? And those are the sort of things, again, if you listen to them, and then you plan things that you plan as a CAD manager. If you plan based on what they say, they've got buy-in to the process, and you will find that your users will be happier. If all you ever do is, you send out a note saying at the, end of quarter one, we're doing these, we've already done these 12 things. They've had no buy-in, they've had nothing into that. Listen to them, it's amazing what you'll find sometimes. There's lots of ways you can collect that. I will talk about, customization, but those non-value added tasks, I've even done things with batch files. Great example was that release. We used to release something and we had to go do these 6 different things in different areas. I was probably one of the worst of them. I didn't want to do that. Those are 6 things at the end that you want to just keep moving. They were the same thing over and over again. I literally just create a batch file. I've created programs, lots of different things that you can do to just automate stuff. The other thing I would mention is you don't automate a bad process just because you do something X, Y, Z. If you're going to automate it, you just made something bad faster. And also realize when you automate anything, I talked about that path of least resistance. If you didn't make it easier and quicker for people to do things, you didn't automate anything. So, again, you've got to make sure that if you do anything automation-wise, it makes a difference. So just a quick summary. We've talked about where to go for answers. I think that's really important. Again, listen, understand what your users are looking for. In data management or anything like that. Maybe those are things that, what you're doing is hard, or, if we did these sort of things, we could be more productive. Be proactive. I would come back, when you go back from, SolidWorks world here, what are you going to do? You've got a lot of sessions, you probably got a lot of ideas you got out of this. Talk to your manager. Say, I want to make our engineering department more productive. I don't think a lot of managers are going to say, no, we really don't want to be more productive. There might be some, but You know, so, and I also talk about measure everything. Same reason why we came up with the performance benchmark, you know, so you can actually see numbers. Always talk with numbers. You know, there's things that you can do if you measure, if you do a productivity project. You know, we've gained this many man hours. Try to put some analytics and metrics behind those things that you do so that your management sees that there's actually a benefit, that administering your system isn't something you can just do in your lunch hour. It is something that you need to plan. It's something that you need to get buy-in and potentially support from them to do. And it does make a difference. Even the things I talked about with like maintaining your computers, giving them a good environment that they can work effectively in, that actually affects your bottom line of your company. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Any other questions? Yes?
With the CAD installation manager, sorry, the SolidWorks installation manager, are there any tips or tricks to getting that to function with a proxy server?
There are ways to do that, yes. What I would do, and I don't remember the exact server names that there's 3 servers or 2 or 3 servers you need to get to, but there is, I think there's 3 sessions on the installation manager this week. I know Tom Semenko from the support team is going to do one of those. Go to one of those. I believe he's got it in his presentation too. And I can't remember the names of the servers off the top of my head. But I think there's 2 server names you need to put in your proxy. Other questions? Yes?
Is there a list of, put in add-ons on SolidWorks? Is there a list of other applications that impact it? Let me give you an example. I was running SolidWorks 2011 installation. Couldn't get the Dropbox to install the SAP to install on it. And then I found out through Google, buried in Google, that it could actually be a .NET framework that was actually causing the issue of it not installed.
Yep.
And I actually repaired the .NET framework. But that would have been a lot easier if I had known that those add-ons were impacting the .NET framework.
Yeah, so when you do the installation manager, that is definitely something, and we'll look at the other components we need. And if you're having a problem, a lot of times that can be the problem. But you go through the log files, you should be able to find that in the log file too. Any other questions? Yes, there's one back.
I got a question, especially on FreeWalk. We're not using it. It's not something that I have really to say. Do you have an opinion using it versus not using it?
I think it's a good thing to use. I would configure and whittle down everything a lot so it's much simpler for them to use. I don't think giving someone 10,000 or 100,000 fasteners that they can throw in their designs is a good idea either. So I think you can whittle that down. There is a session about how to configure an upgrade toolbox also during the session, and I would ask that. Also, if you've got other technical questions, there is a part of the pavilion downstairs that's SolidWorks, and you'll find some support guys down there too. But I would do it, but I would always whittle it down, almost next to nothing. Yes?
On the toolbox we use it, what you can do is configure it so you can associate your company part numbers to the hardware so they show up in your bill of material. So you get your part numbers right there. If you want to push it into a PL1 system,
Yep. Again, if you can make it easy for them, I actually believe in the virtual, fastener board. You're going to give them, here's your 10 fasteners. If you don't use these, then you got to go talk to somebody.
We're using the design content. We've got 4 different types of fasteners. That's it.
Yeah.
Drag and scoop.
Well, and when it's that simple, you might even put that just in the design library, in the library, and just drag them too. Yes.
Hi, we're on 2011. I'm starting to look at the admin image for we used it for 2011, but I'm looking at it for 2015. Your clean uninstall, can I initiate that for the admin image during the 2013 install?
Yes, there's ways to do that. It might be a command line MSI thing, but the other thing about the administrative images, I'm trying to think if there was a clean uninstall option with the admin image. I don't think there is, but there's ways to do it. I mean, literally wrote a batch file at one point that did that. And you can put that something as a start. You can either say start this thing. That thing could be anything, a application, a batch file, a program, whatever, before or after the admin image. Yep. And you may, the only thing I really would be concerned about with the uninstalled, to be honest, is the registry settings. And I can write a reg file that does the minus, that basically subtracts the other one. Again, you need to make sure you looked at how you format that file, because if you put an X by the wrong thing, that's not good. But you could just literally run that little reg file before it starts. Because SolidWorks, even if you do an update, it's really uninstalling the other one and reinstalling the other. The only thing it doesn't get rid of is the registry settings. It's the only thing I think you really need to worry about. So there might be simpler ways of doing that. That's the way I would do it, actually. Anything else? Yes?
We are testing the hardware in SolidWorks, and you said the most important thing is to maintain the baseline. But using SolidWorks benchmark is kind of hard because every SolidWorks release is also a new tool, a new benchmark.
Yeah, and I'm gonna.
It depends. The benchmark depends on the SolidWorks version. So I can compare a benchmark I did on SolidWorks 2010 and a new benchmark based on 2012.
Yeah, and we did that on purpose, and I'll tell you why. What we try to do with the benchmark, is actually do the worst case. So comparing one version of SolidWorks, the way we do it, to another isn't always apples to apples. It's not a direct comparison at times. So the decision we made, which I still think's a good one at the moment, is it's meant to be a comparison against this version, because sometimes it's not meant to be how fast is SolidWorks in this version versus this version. It's meant to be a hardware benchmark. So as the system changes, it's hard to necessarily say that if you had a 100 score here, that 100 score here is directly related. And that's the reason why we did it. Because otherwise it can be harder to interpret. And the fact is that people start saying, well, why is this version of SolidWorks faster than this version? And a hardware test is not meant to do that.
Since you need the external tool that it's not changing along the releases.
Yeah, and that's something definitely we could think about too. And whether or not we can make it so you can compare them and they mean something. That was always the problem. So and there were a lot of cases when we first started doing this where there were a lot of improvements to SolidWorks. So the numbers wouldn't have made sense from one version to the other. And that's what we were fighting originally. I think we could look at that again though and say, are there going to be that big of a differences in the numbers moving forward? I don't know. Okay? All right. Very good. I'll be around. Thank you very much. Have a great SolidWorks world.